Hey guys, it's Bella and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having an incredible day today. In today's video, we're going to be covering another Mystery Monday case, but before we get into it, I just want to mention I did a tutorial on this hair and makeup, so if you're interested, I will leave the link in the description down below, and let's go ahead and get into today's case. Before we get into today's video, I do just want to give a warning that this case is pretty horrific, probably one of the most horrible that I've covered. It involves the murder and torture of a 15-year-old boy, and it is honestly so incredibly heartbreaking. In 2010, 15-year-old Kristys Bamu and his 4 siblings, he had 2 brothers, an older brother who was 22 named Eves, and a younger brother who was 13 years old and was autistic. And he also had 2 sisters, 20-year-old Kelly and a younger 11-year-old sister. The 2 younger siblings haven't been named as they are minors. They were all super excited to head from Paris to London to spend Christmas with their oldest sister, Magali, who was 29, and her boyfriend, Eric who was 28. Magali was born on the 21st of February in 1983 in Zaire, which is now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo, to parents Pierre and Jacqueline Bamu. She spent the first 5 years of her life with her aunt and uncle, and in 1988, when she was 5 years old, her parents Pierre and Jacqueline took her and fled President Mobutu's regime in Zaire long before it became the Democratic Republic of Congo. The family settled in Paris, where Pierre planned to raise his family and opened a carpentry business where he designs and manufactures furniture for hotels and restaurants. And before he opened his business and settled down, however, they did move around quite a bit. Magali was often left behind to finish her studies. Originally, Pierre moved back to Congo in 1996 to try and start his business. Magali was 13 years of age at the time and was sent to live with her mother's niece, Bibi, and her husband, Ferdinand, in Dagenham, I think it's pronounced, in East London. And they were not great to say the least. They practically treated her as if she was a slave. After she finished her studies, she later found work as a receptionist and then as a dental nurse, and this was all before she met Eric Bakubi through a mutual friend. Eric was a soccer coach and the two hit it off right away. Their relationship was off to a great start, but unfortunately it did not last that way for very long. Eric became super controlling. He wouldn't let her wear makeup, he wouldn't let her see her friends, he wouldn't let her go out without him, that sort of thing. She said that he would tell her all the time how stupid and weak she was, and she said that like when you're young, you're really impressionable, and when you hear those sort of things over and over and over again, you start to believe that they're true and really think that way about yourself, which is so sad. And it was really sad too because Magali's parents accepted Eric as one of their own. He called them dad and mum, and they really trusted him. So it was really sad that all of this was going on behind the scenes and they knew nothing about it. Now, in Congo at the time, I don't know what it's like now, but back then, I think witchcraft was like pretty widely believed. And Magali was, ever since she was 5 years old, raised in Europe. So she considered herself a Western woman. She did know about witchcraft, but she didn't really believe in it. Eric, on the other hand, definitely did. He was born in Congo in the same year as Magali in 1983. His mother unfortunately died during childbirth, and he lived with his father, who worked as a gold trader. Now, throughout his life, his father taught him about this type of witchcraft, which is called kindoki. And kindoki was basically believed to be responsible for a lot of child possessions. It was a pretty isolated belief. Like, I'm pretty sure it was only like talked about in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and also a little bit in the UK, as some people immigrated over there and kind of took their beliefs with them and spread them. When a child is pointed out to have kindoki, usually this was pointed out by a religious leader or an elder, there would then be steps taken to rid the child of the evil spirit that was possessing them, and these would be things like exorcisms, it would be things like beatings, starvation, submersions in water, not giving them any water at all to drink and like dehydrating them, making them pray through it. And within this belief, they basically believe that the thing possessing the child has basically like taken over the child, so they don't feel as if they are hurting or torturing the child itself, and that the child isn't feeling any pain, only the evil spirit possessing the child is feeling it, which, like, you know, obviously isn't the case, and the child was having to go through all of these horrible mutilations and beatings and torture. Like, it's pretty horrible stuff. Now, the worst part about this belief is that really simple things that kids do all the time, like really just normal things, can be considered a sign of kindoki. So things as normal as stealing a pencil, biting your nails, wetting the bed can all be a sign of kindoki possession. According to a report in 2012, witchcraft-based child abuse has grown in the United Kingdom as people spread their beliefs about these witchcraft type things like kindoki, for example. And over the last 10 years, there had been 83 reported cases of witchcraft-based child abuse with things like exorcism and torture. The Child Investigation Command at the Scotland Yard reported that these cases involved things like sleep deprivation, forcibly shaving their heads, starvation, and forcing them to drink unknown liquids, and so much more. So anyway, Eric Bakubi would basically go on these long rants about witchcraft and possession and kindoki to Magali, and she said that she would basically just like let him talk. She didn't really believe any of it, but she would just let him kind of get it out of his system and rant about it so that they could get on with their lives afterward. He would talk about how as a child he had visions and he would see like rats that like apparently other people couldn't see, and so when he told his family members about this, they basically took that as a sign that he was possessed by kindoki. Now, much like Magali's family, in 1990, when Eric was 7 years old, he and his uncle fled to London to escape the war that was happening in Congo. And his uncle would talk to him about witchcraft, possession, kindoki, that sort of thing, until he passed away in 2000 from AIDS. Despite his difficult upbringing, Eric did find his passion in life. He played soccer, and then once he stopped playing soccer, he became a soccer coach and had ambitions to one day open his own academy. 4 years after his uncle died, he met Magali, as I mentioned, and they hit it off right away, off to a great start, but things turned sour very quickly and they had a very on and off again relationship. Magali said throughout their relationship that Eric just became more and more obsessed with sorcery and witchcraft, and that eventually he believed that he was like battling some kind of evil at all times. He began experiencing these really vivid dreams of his brother like strangling him as he slept, and so to try and get himself rid of these evil spirits, he would move around constantly just throughout London, like apartment to apartment to apartment, and basically trying to like outrun the evil spirits, I guess. But his fears of witchcraft only grew worse and worse. He began spending majority of his time praying, researching kindoki, consulting with Nigerian pastors, and he began to believe that he, and he alone, was responsible for ridding the world of these evil spirits. He started to like take it upon himself to diagnose people with possessions. Like, there was this one mutual friend that he and Magali had named Naomi Ilonga, and she came to stay with them for a little while, and while she did, he basically accused her of being possessed. This was in 2008 when Naomi came to stay with them for a short period of time, and she was 19 years old and she was a nail biter. Again, like a totally normal, insignificant thing that somebody does. Like, damn, am I possessed because I bit my thumbnail off? So, but basically this nail thing made Eric believe that she had kindoki in her and that she was possessed. For the next 3 days, he didn't allow her to eat, he didn't allow her to sleep, and he and Maggie would pray for her for the whole 3 days. They forcibly cut her hair short. She had hair that was like down to the middle of her back, so it was pretty long, and then they forcibly cut it really short, saying that it was like to release the kindoki that was inside of her. Naomi realized how whack all of this was, and she called her mum to come and rescue her, and she got out of there and she was fine. And then I guess Magali realized how whack all of this was too, and Eric tried to force her to eat off the floor. She refused, and he gave her a black eye. So she went to stay in a women's refuge for the next 3 months and left Eric. During these 3 months though, Eric did not give up. He was constantly trying to manipulate Magali into getting back with her. So 3 months after she moved into the women's refuge, she ended up getting back with Eric, and together they moved into Manor House, an apartment together in Manor House in North London. Eric Eric even proposed to her like right after they got back together, and Magali proposed, making them engaged. Shortly after they got back together is when Magali's siblings were going to come and visit her for Christmas, and her siblings were young and they were all so excited to come from Paris to London to visit their older sister and her fiance, who they all loved. They accepted as a brother of their own, as part of the family, and her parents Pierre and Jacqueline couldn't make it because of work, but they were going to come over as well a couple of days after Christmas on the 27th of December. According to Kelly Bamu, who was the 20-year-old sister, everything started off really well. There was a really nice atmosphere for the first couple of days, but then all of a sudden things started to turn sour when Eric and Magali started to accuse all of the siblings, all 5 of them, of being possessed and carrying and bringing Kondoki into their house. And like, all of these kids were born in Paris. I don't even think most of them knew what Kondoki was. Kelly did, and I think like the older siblings might have like known what it was, but they didn't believe in it, they didn't practice it, they didn't talk about it, like, you know what I mean? So this must have all been so weird and so terrifying for them. For 3 days, Eric and Magali tortured all 5 of the siblings. They made them pray constantly. They wouldn't give them any food, they wouldn't give them anything to drink, and at one point Eric like tried to force them to jump out of a window of their apartment to see if they could fly. Eric would beat them if they tried to speak back. He asked them constantly if they were witches, and Kelly said that she would tell them again and again and again that they weren't witches, they didn't know what they were talking about, but it didn't matter to Eric, like he had already made up his mind. She said that Eric truly believed that the 5 siblings had traveled to London just to kill him. I honestly cannot even imagine what they went through. Like, reading what Kelly testified in court, it's so crazy to even think about. She said that they were begging them to, you know, obviously stop torturing them, to believe that they weren't witches, that they weren't possessed, but they didn't believe them, and they were looking to their older sister Magali, who they looked up to, and she didn't do anything about it. She didn't care. She was 100% on Eric's side. And you know, this older sister, like, she's 29 years old. This is someone who they felt safe around, that they were so excited to see. Eventually, Kelly and her younger 11-year-old sister confessed to being witches to avoid more beatings, which worked for them, but unfortunately did not work for Kristy. So that same night that they confessed to being witches, and there's differing reports on how this happened. Some reports say that Kristy was being beaten, and as he was being beaten, he involuntarily urinated on himself. And there are other reports that that night he was asleep and accidentally urinated in the bed. Whatever the case may be, he wet himself. Eric found his underwear that he had urinated in and took this as a sign that Kristy alone was the one who was possessed and had brought Kondoki into his house. From this point on, Eric basically focused on Kristy and Kristy alone, and he even forced the other siblings to join in on Kristy's torture. Eric and Magali had been redecorating their apartment when the siblings came to visit, and so they had some tiles that were loose, like they hadn't been cemented to the floor yet. And so he forced Kristy's siblings to hold him down as he smashed these loose tiles over Kristy's head. While his siblings were restraining him, he would hit him with a hammer. He got Magali to get some pliers and mutilate one of his ears. At one point, he placed a metal bar in Kristy's mouth and used a dumbbell and a chisel to like smash it into his mouth, knocking out the majority of his teeth. Kristy, who was just 15 years old, for 3, almost 4 days, was tortured with a hammer, with a chisel, with a metal bar, with a dumbbell, with a stick, and also with knives, which they used to make cuts all over his body and all over his face, like mutilating his face. He had over 130 separate injuries on his body, and after the 3-4 day period, he was just begging them and begging his older sister Magali to let him die. It was honestly so incredibly heartbreaking to hear about what this poor boy had to go through. On Christmas Eve, so the 24th of December, Eric was forcing the other siblings to clean up some of the blood around the apartment. He was playing really loud music, he was yelling yelling at them, and one of their downstairs neighbors heard all of this going on and reported it to the building management. Building management then sent a plumber to go and check on the apartment, which is so confusing to me. Like, why a plumber to check on that? Like a domestic disturbance sort of case. Anyway, the plumber went up to the apartment. He didn't enter or anything. He heard like some water violently splashing around, which he reported to the building management, but they didn't do anything further. They didn't check on it any further. They just left it. You know, it's honestly so sad to think about the fact that these children were so excited to visit their sister, and now here she was insisting that they deserved all of this torture that was happening to them. Magali actually called her parents on several occasions, who, as I mentioned, was still in Paris, and they were planning on visiting just a couple days later on the 27th of December. She put her sister Kelly on the phone at knife point and basically forced her to make up stories about what a great time they were having and all the different activities that they were doing while they were there. Eventually, Eric called Magali's father, Pierre, and told him that Kristy was possessed, and if he didn't come and get him right away, that he was going to kill him. And like, at first, Pierre didn't believe it, because like, he trusted Eric, he loved Eric, he considered Eric a son. Like, there's no way that he thought randomly Eric was just gonna murder his son. Like, it was just coming out of seemingly nowhere. Like, he and Eric actually planned to open a restaurant together in London. That's how close they were. So this was just like pretty unbelievable to Pierre. I think he thought it was like some kind of joke or prank or something. But then they put Kristy on the phone to him, and he told him that Eric was going to kill him. And that is when Pierre and Jacqueline started freaking out. They tried to hire a car so that they could drive the almost like 6-hour or 5-hour drive from Paris to London themselves, but it was Christmas Day when they were calling, so there was no rental cars available, there was no taxis, there was no way for them to get to Paris to London. There was just nothing they could do but wait the 2 days until the 27th when they had originally planned to arrive. But unfortunately, that would be too late. Toward the end of their almost 4 days of torture, Eric and Magali forced the 5 children into the bathtub. He started to hose the children down with ice cold water. It was some kind of cleansing ritual to cleanse them of their kindoki, and as he did so, the bathtub started filling up with water. And Kristy was just mentally and physically exhausted. He had endured 4 days of torture, had over 130 separate injuries on his body. He had been sleep deprived, he had been starved, he had been given no water, and he just had no will to live anymore. So on the 25th of December in 2010, Kristy's head quietly slipped under the water of the bathtub and he died. After a few minutes, his older sister Kelly realized he was underwater and alerted Eric. Eric immediately grabbed him and pulled him out of the bathtub and tried to resuscitate him, but it was too late. He then called emergency services and they came and took him to the hospital, tried to resuscitate him, but again, it was too late and he was already dead by the time they arrived on the scene. At 8 p.m. that night, Kelly Bamu called her father Pierre and told him that Kristy was dead. When paramedics arrived on the scene, it was totally cooked. There was blood everywhere. There were shattered tiles on the floor that were all covered in blood. There was a bunch of tools laid out around the house which were covered in blood, skin, and hair. All of the throw pillows, the floors, the curtains, all covered in blood. And the apartment itself was a mess. Everything was strewn around everywhere. And paramedics were there to deal with a boy who would drown in a bathtub. So to enter this house expecting to deal with that, and then entering to this house or apartment that is in complete disarray with blood everywhere, must have been such a shock. Eric and Magali were arrested then and there, and they were charged with murder as well as 2 counts of causing actual bodily harm. Eric pled guilty to manslaughter and the 2 counts of causing actual bodily harm on the grounds of diminished responsibility caused by brain damage, but this plea was rejected. And he and Magali both had to go to trial. The jury in Eric's case consisted of 7 women and 5 men, and this case, the torture of the poor boy and his siblings had to endure, and all of the evidence was so gruesome and horrific that the judge on the case, David Paget, excused the jury from ever having to serve jury duty ever again. It was also the last case that Judge David Paget would ever have to reside over. Now, during the trial, Eric's attorney claimed that due to a brain injury in his youth, his cultural upbringing, and schizophrenia, that he couldn't be held fully responsible for his actions. Magali's defense was that she didn't believe in witchcraft, that she was being manipulated by Eric and he forced her to torture all 5 of her siblings, and that it wasn't her, it was all him. Magali's sister Kelly, who was 20 at the time of the murder, testified against her sister in court, and she broke down in tears several times as she had to relive the whole horrific ordeal. She said that Kristy begged her for forgiveness over and over again, but that she did absolutely nothing, and actually told him that he deserved everything that was happening to them. She told all of the siblings that they deserved everything that was happening. She said she had no pity for her sister, just as her sister had no pity for them. Eric Bakubi was eventually sentenced to a minimum of 30 years in prison, and Magali was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years. Judge Paget told the couple that the case was particularly serious and involved sadistic behavior. He said that he could accept that brain damage may have made Eric more inclined to believe Kristy was a witch, but that the belief in witchcraft, however genuine, cannot excuse an assault to another person, let alone the killing of another human being. He also told Magali that he did not believe and he didn't accept that she didn't believe in witchcraft or that she was forced to attack Kristy. He added that the case was almost past belief because it was so horrific. This is a statement that Kristy's father, Pierre, made. He said, "Kristy died in unimaginable circumstances at the hands of people he loved and trusted. People we all loved and trusted. I feel betrayed. To know that Kristy's own sister, Magali, did nothing to save him makes the pain that much worse. Christmas, a festival of joy, and Jacqueline's birthday will always be scarred by these terrible events." Kristy would be 25 years old if he was still alive today. That is all of the information that I have on this case. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.